The following is a recording of a live questions and answers session with Chris McCann that took place on Friday, November 1st, 2013.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to eBible Fellowship's Questions and Answers time for Friday evening. These broadcasts are live every Friday at about 9:30 p.m. Eastern, and this program is designed to interact with you with your questions and comments related to the Bible, and we'll try to respond as well as possible by going to the Bible. And so, with our Bibles at the ready, it's now time to turn things over to our speaker for this Friday evening Questions and Answers time and say hello to Chris McCann. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to eBible Fellowship's Friday night question and answer program. Tonight, we're going to open up the room to take your question or your comment, and each person is invited to share whatever is on your mind by contacting us in one of the ways that were just mentioned, and we'll be happy to receive your call. Well, we have a short time together tonight, so we're going to open up the room right away and go to the first person on the phones. Welcome to our question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Good evening, Chris. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you. Please go ahead.
Chris, could you please read Exodus chapter 28, verse 41?
Exodus 28.
Verse 41.
Okay. And thou shalt put them upon Aaron thy brother, and his sons with him, and shalt anoint them and consecrate them, and sanctify them, that they may minister unto me in the priest's office.
And also Ezekiel chapter 45, verse 15 and 16.
Ezekiel 45, verse 15. And one lamb out of the flock, out of 200, out of the fat pastures of Israel, for a meat offering, and for a burnt offering, and for peace offerings, to make reconciliation for them, saith the Lord Jehovah. All the people of the land shall give this oblation for the prince in Israel.
Oh, I think I got the wrong verse. I'm sorry. Well, I wanted in Ezekiel 45. I'm trying to find it right now. There's a verse
where they will not sweat.
Levites are restricted. The Levites are restricted from service at the altar of God because they've gone after their own idols. I'm sorry to give you the very wrong.
Yeah, I don't know where that is.
Ezekiel 45, I'm sorry. God, I've been preparing this because I saw a tie there with Revelation 7:9. What I gave, 45, 15, and 16. There's a verse in Ezekiel chapter 45 where God restricts the Levites to go to enter the altar because they gone after their idols, and then by yet says God appointed them keepers of the house. Instead, the honor to enter the most holy, to stand before God, was given to the Zadokites, the sons of Zadok the priest. And so now the Zadokites in Ezekiel 45 are instructed to wear linen garments, and they were given really strict rules.
You might be thinking of Ezekiel 44. Let's go to Ezekiel 44, verse 15. But the priests, the Levites, the son of Zadok, that kept the charge of my sanctuary when the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall come near to me to minister unto me, and they shall stand before me to offer unto me the fat and the blood, saith the Lord Jehovah. They shall enter into my sanctuary, and they shall come near to my table to minister unto me. They shall keep my charge, and it shall come to pass that when they enter in at the gates of the inner court, they shall be clothed with linen garments, and no wool shall come upon them. Whilst they minister in the gates of the inner court and within, they shall have linen bonnets upon their heads, and shall have linen breeches upon their loins. They shall not gird themselves with anything that causeth sweat. Are those the verses?
Yes, I know that you went to read. You explained in one of the studies a few studies ago about the sweat on the clothing and that identified with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. But I was looking at really at how God restricts the Levites to enter his altar, the most holy, but he keeps them as keepers of the house. However, he appoints.
Oh, that's verse 14. That's verse 14.
Oh, yes, right.
Of Ezekiel 44. But I will make them
Right.
keepers of the charge of the house, for all the service thereof, and for all that shall be done therein.
Yes. So that honor is given instead. The honor to enter the altar is given. The sanctuary is given to the Zadokites. So I went to read about the Zadokites, and they are the sons of Zadok the priest, a descendant of Aaron, still in the line of the Levites. So when I read the restrictive rules of in the book of the Levites in chapters 19 through 22, I felt like I thought that maybe the Zadokites still being Levites, that they tie. I saw a tie with Revelation 7:9 as we or the elect, that they wear the white garments, they can enter, they can stand in front of the throne of the Lamb only when they are holy. And so I tend to see that there are two groups of priests: the Levites, which I have identified with. I myself, I might be wrong, I've identified it with the priests during the church age, and then after that, God still keeps them, but just as keepers of the house. But the
the Levites were always to do service in the house of the Lord, and only descendants of Aaron, and Aaron would have been a Levite also, as well as Moses, and the priests were of the tribe of Levi, but a certain family within that tribe, and the rest of the Levites not of the family of Aaron, well, then they would do service, or they would be helpers to the priests, and so we can see the priests as a figure of Christ himself, and the Levites. God says of the Levites that they are mine, that they would typify the believers who labor in the gospel with Christ as he moves in us to will and do of his good pleasure, and we're also typified by priests, but in that relationship, we can see that the Levites are helpers of the priesthood.
Yeah. Chris, thank you. Can I ask you a very short question? It does not relate to the Bible, but can I?
Well, actually, I'm sorry. We have three others on the phone right now, and not too long of the time together. Well, thank you for your question. Let's go to the next person on the phone. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Good evening. Could you please read two short verses, and then I have a comment? The last half of Jeremiah 46, verse 28, please.
Jeremiah 46, verse 28, the last half says, let me read the whole thing for my benefit. Fear thou not, O Jacob, my servant, saith Jehovah, for I am with thee. For I will make a full end of all the nations whither I have driven thee. But I will not make a full end of thee, but correct thee in measure, yet will I not leave thee wholly unpunished.
Okay, and then please Daniel 9, verse 8.
Daniel 9, 8. O Lord, to us belongeth confusion of face, to our kings, to our princes, to our fathers, because we have sinned against thee.
I've never heard anyone teach of this, but if we stayed in the church for years after the tribulation started, to me, we were worshiping Satan unknowingly. Now, is this the kind of sin that this is a figure of repenting of, realizing afterwards that you were worshiping Satan for years if you stayed in the church?
Well, the true believers worship God, and even though Satan was in the place of the corporate church, and he was positioned to receive worship as God, since the true believer is saved, then the condition of his heart is that his heart bows down to God only. And so I don't know, I'm very hesitant to say that we worship Satan, but we were ignorant of what had taken place. We lacked knowledge, and so we could have committed sin. Believers commit all kinds of sins. We could commit any sin that anyone else commits, and so we could, yes, we could have sinned. And Daniel is speaking corporately when he is saying his prayer, and he is saying, we have sinned and committed iniquity and have done wickedly and have rebelled. In verse 5 of Daniel 9, even by departing from thy precepts and from thy judgments. So we as believers were a part of the corporate church, just like others unsaved were a part of the corporate church. And so we also we can say that we sinned as the church that we were a part of sinned. But like all sin, any sin that a true believer is involved in, it is forgiven. And that's the huge difference between a true believer and someone who's not a true believer, is that the sins of the unbeliever or someone not saved are upon them. And so God judges them for those sins. But the sins of the true believer, they're all paid for, and whether it's sins of murder, adultery, lying, stealing, or perhaps participating in a church where a false doctrine is being put forth, or something like that. It's all sin. It's all paid for, and the true believer has all sin forgiven.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for those scriptures. And let's go to the next person on the phone. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Yeah, last Friday we ran out of time, and I was trying to get through, and then Monday there was no program. If you remember, somebody asked a question about why was Jesus called the Son of Man?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said that he was the Son of Man. He had to become the Son of Man to take sins of man, to pay the penalty.
Well, yeah, I'm not completely comfortable with that because I haven't studied that too much, but it seems, it appears that that's the idea, that he took upon him the seed of Abraham, and we know that God gave him a body to suffer and die from the foundation of the world, and then later he entered into the human race and was born of the Virgin Mary in order to demonstrate what he had done. So
you mean that before the foundation of the world, he could be considered to have been man?
Well, yeah, that he didn't receive an animal's body. He would have received a man's body. Melchizedek made an appearance as a man in history, and he had no father, no mother, and it was the Lord Jesus. And Melchizedek is the high priest, and Christ came after the order of Melchizedek. we normally think Melchizedek was a type and figure of Christ, but actually Jesus came after the order of him, Melchizedek, and so that means Melchizedek was first, and Jesus was the lamb slain from the foundation of the world, and the lamb is the sacrificial offering, and it is a high priest that offers up the lamb, and Melchizedek would be just Christ himself offering up himself, just as we understand that taking place in 33 AD, that Christ offered himself.
Yeah, I mean, the way, maybe because we ran out of time, but the way it sounded was that he took he paid for the sins on the, it sounded like you were saying he paid for the sins on the cross. He became a man.
No.
In time and took his sins on the cross.
We know that's not possible. The Bible won't allow that, but God does say.
I realize that.
In 1 Peter, chapter 2, in verse 24, who his own self bare our sins in his own body on the tree. So here it's speaking of Christ bearing sins in his own body. He had a body, and that would have been a man's body, and so he was Melchizedek. He was the one that offered up himself, and God suited him with a body. He paid the penalty for the sins of man, and then later, when he was born of the Virgin Mary, well, now God, I don't know how we understand that exactly. Maybe it's a demonstration of what he did, but now this is the body that Christ will have for all eternity, as that body was resurrected, and he now has that resurrected eternal spiritual body that he will have forever.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up.
Well, thank you for calling back. And let's go to our next caller. Welcome to our question and answer program tonight. Please go ahead with your call.
Hi, Chris. My question goes back to the first caller on Ezekiel 44. And it relates to verses 10 to 15. You can if you want to read them, but my point is that God very explicitly is correcting the Levites for leading Israel astray, and then he puts them in charge of the house, and you shall be ministers in my sanctuary in verse 11. But later he says, but the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, he separates them out because they kept the charge of my sanctuary when the children of Israel went astray from me. They shall come near to, I'm in verse 15. They shall come near to me to minister unto me, and they shall stand before me to offer unto me the fat and the blood, say the Lord God. The point is that he's differentiating the Levites from the tribe of Zadok.
Well, let me read. Actually, I would like to read those verses. Let me read from verse 9 of Ezekiel 44. Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, no stranger, uncircumcised in heart, nor uncircumcised in flesh, shall enter into my sanctuary, of any stranger that is among the children of Israel. And the Levites that are gone away far from me, when Israel went astray, which went astray away from me after their idols, they shall even bear their iniquity. Yet they shall be ministers in my sanctuary, having charge at the gates of the house, and ministering to the house. They shall slay the burnt offering and the sacrifice for the people, and they shall stand before them to minister unto them, because they ministered unto them before their idols, and caused the house of Israel to fall into iniquity. Therefore have I lifted up mine hand against them, saith the Lord Jehovah, and they shall bear their iniquity. And they shall not come near unto me to do the office of a priest unto me, nor to come near to any of my holy things in the most holy place, but they shall bear their shame and their abominations which they have committed. But I will make them keepers of the charge of the house for all the service thereof, and for all that shall be done therein. But the priests, the Levites, the sons of Zadok, that kept the charge of my sanctuary, when the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall come near to me to minister unto me, and they shall stand before me to offer unto me the fat and the blood, saith the Lord Jehovah. They shall enter into my sanctuary, and they shall come near to my table to minister unto me, and they shall keep my charge. Well, it does sound that God is making a distinction between the Levites and these sons of Zadok regarding their faithfulness. But I had better not say anything, because I think it's interesting what God is doing here, but I'm not really all that familiar with this passage, so it's probably best if I don't comment.
I'm glad you read verse 9. It's interesting. It says, "No stranger is uncircumcised in heart, nor uncircumcised in flesh." That's interesting. So you might be able to circumcise your flesh, but you can't circumcise your heart. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's interesting, just as a note, an observation, the Levites, they were given charge to. It looks like they were giving charge to keep the law. And that's what kind of like what the churches did and like that. So when in verse 11, where they were given charge to keep the slay the burnt offerings and the sacrifices and and like that, it looks like he's saying that they're given charge to keep the law, which we know is not a good thing.
Well, the Levites are actually pretty complicated. When we look where God on one hand, he says the Levites are mine, and he took them instead of the firstborn. And so the Levites can picture the elect. They can also picture Christ himself. And we know in Malachi 3, for instance, where God is referring to his people coming through the fires of Judgment Day, the purifying fires that are trying his elect, he calls them sons of Levi. So but it's also true, just as priests typify the elect, we're a royal priesthood. But, we can go in the Bible and we can find instances and occasions where there's false priests. And here God is referring to Levites that were not faithful. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. So I just rather not comment any further.
Just wanted to bring up that observation, just to show that the differentiation, something to think about. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That does help to see more of the context. All right. Does anyone else have a question or a comment that you'd like to make? If so, please give us a call. Or if you're listening on Pal Talk, you can enter your question or comment into the text, and it will be relayed to us in the room. Well, let's go to the next person on the phone. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Yes, hello, Chris. Could you please read 2 Kings chapter 10 and it's verse 28?
2 Kings 10:28. Thus Jehu destroyed Baal out of Israel.
Right. This whole chapter dealing with rounding up the prophets of Baal and then killing them all, does this typify the Great Tribulation when Jehu, as a picture of Satan, actually was to divide the wheat from the tares for the burning on May 21st of 2011?
Well, it does. Jehu is a figure of Satan, and God commissions him to destroy the house of Ahab and Jezebel. And from Revelation chapter 2, we find that Jezebel is completely identified with the churches as they involve themselves in spiritual fornication and going after other gospels. And so God raises up Jehu, who is extremely obedient to what God wants him to do as far as destroying the house of Ahab. He's very zealous and very good at killing these. He killed at the same time a king of Judah and a king of Israel because they were all part of the house of Ahab. He was instrumental in Jezebel's death. He then rounded up the prophets of Baal. All of this represents the fallen church, the apostate New Testament churches and congregations, as God loosed Satan. And just as God said to Nebuchadnezzar, "You are my servant," and Nebuchadnezzar's zeal in destroying Judah and Jerusalem is similar to Jehu's zeal in going after the house of Ahab. And when God loosed Satan, that's one thing that Satan does expertly, is to destroy. And so as he entered into the church and took his seat as the man of sin, and he destroyed the true gospel within the churches and congregations. He was accomplishing God's purpose in bringing judgment upon the church, upon the house of God. So Jehu is very much a picture of Satan, as Satan goes about destroying. And then we find later that when it comes time to keep the commandments of God, that Jehu did not remove the high places of Jeroboam. And so he was an unfaithful man, an unsaved man, and yet he did well in these early commissions to kill and to destroy.
I wasn't sure if you'd gone over this before. I'm sorry if you did. I caught a fragment of it before, but I just wanted to ask you that question because those verses kind of came up.
Okay. Well. Yes. Thank you. It's another one of God's historical parables that teaches important spiritual truths. But thank you for that verse and your question.
Thank you.
And let's go to the next person on the phone. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hi, Chris. Again, last Friday I asked my question and then you disappeared. So if I could ask it again.
Yeah. Let me just comment about that because I do want to apologize to people who have joined in with us regularly. You may hear us disappear, and oftentimes it's because Skype just knocks us out. And I had been logging on using Skype, and it has become very unreliable. We're trying something new tonight, and I didn't log on to Skype. I'm being bridged in through something that Bill did. So far, so good. Hopefully it will at least lessen the number of times we're cut off.
Okay, that's fine. I understand. The verses were Ezekiel 3, 12, and 13.
Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 12 says, "Then the Spirit took me up, and I heard behind me a voice of a great rushing, saying, 'Blessed be the glory of Jehovah from his place.' I heard also the noise of the wings of the living creatures that touch one another, and the noise of the wheels over against them, and a noise of a great rushing."
Yeah,
hello?
The word yes, hello?
Yes, go ahead.
The word rushing, I put myself on mute and took myself off, so that might have been what you heard. Anyhow, the rushing is Strong's 7494. It's also translated as earthquake in Isaiah 29:6.
Mm-hmm.
And great earthquake is also translated in Ezekiel 38:19. The Strong's numbers for great and earthquake. The Strong's number for great is 1419. My question is in the context of this chapter, can you comment on these verses?
Well,
from the beginning of the chapter.
Yeah, well, we know going back to chapter 2 that that when God says in verse 1, Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak unto thee, and the Spirit entered into Ezekiel, and he began to speak, and then God says, I send thee to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation. That this is picturing the Great Tribulation period after the two witnesses were slain, as we read in Revelation 11, and then they stood upon their feet. And a good portion of the message that the two witnesses proclaimed had to do with pronouncing the judgment of God upon the churches and congregations. And that's why Ezekiel is sent to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation. And the chapter 2 really goes into detail concerning the rebelliousness of Israel, which points to the rebelliousness of the churches and God's judgment upon them. And then in chapter 3, verse 1, it says, Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, eat that thou findest, eat this roll, and go speak unto the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat that roll. And he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels with this roll that I give thee. Then did I eat it, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness. This is similar to Revelation 10's language, where the Apostle John is told in verse 9, And I went unto the angel and said unto him, Give me the little book. And he said unto me, Take it and eat it up, and it shall make thy belly bitter, but it shall be in thy mouth sweet as honey. And this is very similar language, but it's slightly different. We don't read that it was bitter in his belly, just sweet in his mouth. And that's the nature of the word of God, that it's like honey. And so it's a sweet thing, no matter what it proclaims. But as we go on reading this chapter, it does not seem to fit with Judgment Day, May 21 in 2011. Right. And so that's what makes it kind of difficult to place and to understand where exactly is this fitting in, and then the language that you're referring to of the great rushing or the great earthquake and so on. So this is related to the watchman in verse 17 of Ezekiel 3. Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore hear the word at my mouth and give them warning from me. And then God goes on to give warning. And the warning, like in Ezekiel 33 of the watchman, is when you see the sword approaching, then you blow the trumpet to warn the people. And so this would relate to the time before Judgment Day, while people could still take warning. And yet some of the language identifies with what we've learned about Judgment Day, and that could just be, again, because of the similarity of the same cup, the identical cup. Yeah, giving the cup first to the church and then to the world.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out, that the great earthquake, there was a great earthquake, and whenever we read that, we think of Judgment Day, but here it's not. It's referring to the Great Tribulation.
Well, back in Revelation chapter 8, where we read of the judgment on the third part, it says in verse 5, And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. and then it goes on to describe the judgment on the third part of this and the third part of that, and so it could be the sword of judgment came upon the church, and the sword came upon the world, and so we find similar, sometimes identical language to describe these judgments because they were both spiritual judgments coming from God.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you for that question and bringing up those verses. And I would like to thank everyone this evening for joining with us, and especially for those that raised their questions and comments and directed us to Bible verses that we had an opportunity to read and consider. But we have come to the end of our time tonight, so I'll say good night. Please join us this coming Sunday afternoon with our online fellowship and our live question and answer period during that fellowship. But for now, good night, and may the Lord's perfect will be done.
And thanks for joining us again for eBible Fellowship's Questions and Answers Time with your speaker, Chris McCann. You can join us for these questions and answers sessions Sunday afternoon following Sunday studies and Monday and Friday evenings following the Monday and Friday evening studies. Until next time, may the Lord's perfect will be done.